In a world of wealth, deceptions, and secret betrayals, Margot reads the messages that reveal her husband's infidelity while calmly asserting control, reminding us that knowing your worth and taking decisive action can turn heartbreak into empowerment. So if you felt the intensity of her journey, give one like and one share to help bring more stories of strength and resilience. Thanks for watching.
She found the playlist on a Tuesday morning. It was called Cast Summer, with 47 songs. 7. Pregnant. She read through 14 months of messages in just 11 minutes. Then she put the phone back exactly where she'd found it. She got her yogurt, ate it while standing, and stared out at the yard her own money paid for. Then she made a single phone call. She didn't call to scream or confront him. She called her lawyer, Russell, and said, "I need the prenuptial documents." In that moment, she stopped being his wife and remembered that she was an Ellison. He had spent $18,000 on flowers for another woman's birthday, a party he planned while she was putting together their nursery. He toasted a 30-year-old in a red dress in a building her own family owned. He never actually read the prenup. He never asked about her trust fund. He just assumed she was simple and that she needed him. That was his one huge mistake, and it was about to cost him everything. The most dangerous woman in any room is the one who already knows the truth and is just deciding what she's going to do next. But this is not just a story about betrayal. It's about a woman who made herself small so that someone else could feel big. This is about the moment she decided she was done shrinking. If this story is hitting home for you, drop an emoji in the comments. And if you know a woman who's been a little too quiet lately, share this with her. She might just need to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss the stories that really matter. It was a soundtrack for a life I was supposed to have, just left on the kitchen counter. It was called Cast Summer, and it contained 47 promises. Margot only knew 3 of them. I'd told Margot I hated those songs. It was just easier than telling her they belonged to someone else now. It was a Tuesday in late August. I pictured her at home, 7 months pregnant, the kitchen, where the light always made her look like a stranger. Once hopeful, but now just washed out and overexposed. She'd see my phone and think it was hers, since they look exactly the same. I never locked it when I was around her. She called it trust. I called it confidence. The supreme confidence of a man who was convinced his wife had simply stopped looking for anything more from life. She would have seen the text notification pop up first. The little preview just said, "Can't wait Saturday." She would have put the phone down. Then she would have picked it back up, fought the urge, and then she would have given in. Of course she would. A voice in her head was probably screaming, "Don't look, Margot." But she had to look. She would open the conversation. See, the contact name was just work, a weak attempt to hide it. Then she'd scroll back 14 months. She would stand there for 11 minutes and witness a secret marriage. My real marriage. The words weren't dirty. They were so much worse than that. Full of private jokes and dinners at places I told her I was too tired to go to. She would read until she couldn't breathe, until she saw the most recent messages. The Rosewood rooftop confirmed 50 guests. The fancy champagne, the tasting menu. Cast as writing, "You are insane." And my reply, "You only turned 30 once, you deserve the world." She would look down at her own body, carrying my child as I planned an entire world for another woman. She wouldn't cry, not yet. Her mind would turn cold and fast, like a machine trying to process an impossible truth. She wouldn't take a picture. She wouldn't read it twice. She would place my phone back on a kitchen island exactly where it was. Then she would get her yogurt. She'd stand there and eat it with staring at the yard that I had landscaped just for her. The yard her money paid for. That single thought would finally break through. A thought she was always taught to ignore. Her family, her father, and his rules about quiet wealth, about your character being the loudest thing in the room. It was a lesson I had never bothered to learn. And right now her character was eating yogurt in bare feet, deciding if we were over. She wouldn't call her friends. Not yet. She would just wash her spoon and put it in the drying rack. Because that's what she does. She keeps things in order while her world is falling apart. When I came downstairs at 7:45, my timer was perfect. The coffee was already made. She was sitting with her laptop, her reading glasses on. She looked up at me. "There's coffee," she said. I poured myself a cup. I said nothing about Saturday. I kissed the top of her head, a loving but empty gesture for a ghost. And then I just walked out the door. She would sit in the silence I left behind, hearing only the hum of the refrigerator. Then she would pick up her own phone. She would dial a number she knew by heart. The phone would ring just 2 times. A man would answer. "Russell," she would say, "I need the prenuptial documents and the Ellison trust schedule." There would be a pause on the other end. He would ask her why. Not yet, she would tell him, but soon. Then she would hang up. She would feel the baby kick inside her. A daughter who was already demanding to be heard. "I've got you," she would whisper to her belly. "I have got you." The morning light would fall on her. It wouldn't seem too bright anymore. It would feel like a new beginning. The quiet certainty of a woman who was remembering the ground beneath her feet was always hers to command. She never told me the whole truth about her family. She probably had her reasons. But in that silent kitchen, holding a secret big enough to swallow a continent, she would finally understand that the walls she built to protect herself were about to become her fortress. Her best friend Patrice has known her for 11 years. And in those 11 years, Patrice knew 2 things for sure. Margot never, ever broke down in public, and a call at 8:15 in the morning meant the world had just ended. Patrice would make good coffee, the French press she saved for true emergencies. Margot would show up in the clothes she'd slept in, her hair just held up by a pencil. Pregnant, she walked like someone carrying the heavy weight of a final one decision. She would sit at the kitchen table and tell Patrice everything. The phone, the songs, the texts, the party. Patrice would just listen, her silence a show of incredible restraint, her jaw clenched tight. When the story was over, she would simply ask, "How are you?" "I'm fine," Margot would say. "You are not fine." "No," Margot would admit, "but I am functional." She would want to confess that she always knew. Not the details, but the feeling of deep wrongness she had blamed on hormones or stress or even me. She knew. She just didn't want to be the kind of woman who knew things like that. Patrice only knew a tiny piece of the truth about Margot's money. To me, she was just a simple comfort. She dwelled somewhere in Connecticut with a family home. Her father, Theo Ellison, had been what you might call comfortable. Old money, but the very quiet kind. Margot's life was modest, a normal car, simple clothes. Her little job as an art consultant was just a passion project, something to keep her busy. That was a kind of freedom, I guess. The kind that doesn't feel the need to show off. I never bothered with the details. Why would I? Russell Hart was just some family lawyer. I signed her papers at my desk, the prenup she slid in front of me before we were married. I had some lawyer I found online look it over for about 40 minutes. This was for the best. That contract on my life, the one I never really read, was ending. I never said that out loud, of course. Vivian Ellison had given her daughter a silent weapon, and I had been foolish enough to make her use it. Her friend, Patrice, probably asked her, "How long?" 14 months is what she would have said. 14 months. The number hardly even registered. Our second anniversary in Portugal feels like a movie I saw, not a life I lived. I remember she had a sunburn across her shoulders. I bought a piece of ceramic tile, a prop for the set of our home. It's still hanging there, a silent reminder. Patrice would then ask about the baby. That was 13 months ago. A year and a month. So yes, I was already seeing someone else when she told me she was pregnant. I said all the lines I was supposed to say. We will figure this out together. Every single word was a lie. I told her I was the luckiest man in the world. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. My real life was happening somewhere else. The quiet kitchen just hummed, completely unaware. A bird hit a window, a normal sound on a morning that was unbearable. Her friend Patrice had always hated me. I could feel her judgment for years. She saw the small cruelties in my words, the little put-downs. She thought I saw Margot's art as just a hobby, a way for a bored woman to fill her time. She noticed how I always steered conversations at dinner, comments about our house, my car, my surprise when she knew something I didn't. Margot called it being modest. That wasn't it. I saw her as simple and predictable. There is a huge difference. I never imagined she was hiding anything. I just assumed There was nothing important to find. I sat with that thought as the truth of it settled deep inside of me. She never suspected I was hiding anything. She just believed there was nothing important to find. Then my friend asked the question and I always avoided. What are you going to do? I took a long breath. I looked at my hands and the steering wheel. I looked at the road ahead of me. I am going to the party, I said, with total certainty. It's all set for Saturday at the Rosewood rooftop. 50 guests, the best champagne, and a huge dinner for Cassandra's 30th birthday. The thing is, my wife Margot has absolutely no idea. I said this under my breath because I have to keep this secret for just one more week. Some truths, I've learned, need to be handled with care. She bought a new black dress for that night, one with a fancy waistline. I barely even looked at it. I knew what she paid, and to her, it was pocket change. The drive to my office took 22 minutes. I spent every second of it thinking about the corner I was backed into, remembering all the things I'd tried to bury. Like the first time I met her mother, Vivian Ellison. She met us at their house in Connecticut in a smaller cottage on the massive property. Vivian served us tea and was perfectly nice. She showed me her rose garden, asking all the proper questions about my job, my family, and what I wanted with her daughter. Later, when I stepped out of the room for just a second, she asked Margot a simple question. He has no idea, does he? It wasn't really a question. No, Margot admitted. Then her mother asked when she was going to tell me. When I know for sure he loves me for me, Margot replied. Her mother gave her a look that seemed to see everything. That's not wisdom, she said calmly. That's fear, and you're smart enough to know the difference. Yes, Margot said she knew, but she never told me the secret. Maybe she meant to, after a year, after we had something solid. But 1 year slipped into 2, and then we were getting married. I signed a prenuptial agreement without even thinking about it. That secret, if that's what you want to call it, became the very ground our life was built on. A wall I didn't even know existed. She never lied about who she was. She just left out the most important part of the story. Was that wrong of her? I've been asking myself that for 3 years, and I still don't know. The rich women I dated before her always looked at you in a specific way, like you were a prize they had to win or a project to fix. But Margot looked at me like I was just a guy, a regular, sometimes complicated man. And I needed that. I needed to be a real person, not some kind of business deal. But maybe in the end I just created a wife who thought she was marrying up, who saw me as the one who provided everything, someone who believed she was completely dependent on me. I cut that thought off right there. I was in my car in our driveway. I'd been sitting there for 6 minutes with the garage door wide open. I could see my golf clubs in the corner and the old paint cans from the renovation we did 2 years ago. I paid every bit of it. She just picked the paint colors. It felt fair then. I went inside. She wouldn't be home until 7, giving me a few hours. I walked by her home office, the place I called her art room, like it was some kid's playroom. It was a cute nickname for her cute little hobby. She'd sit at that big mahogany desk, open her laptop, and make phone calls, taking it all so seriously. The 2 chairs facing her were always empty, just waiting for clients who never showed up. In my head, I felt 62 years old, but on the outside, I probably looked 55. I was the man of the house. I felt like I'd known her longer than she'd even known herself. I saw myself as a younger version of my own father, trying to build out something that would last. It was comforting, but also kind of scary. She would tell me all about her day, and I would just listen, keeping my face perfectly still, like it was made of stone. When she finished, I would ask her how her little project was coming along. She was 31 weeks pregnant. I had to know what I was legally owed. I figured I would ask my lawyer about it one day when the time was right. A trust was set up so she was protected, and my future money was safe. Whatever we built together, we were supposed to share. It was all about being fair. That's the part my lawyer could never get. He only saw the numbers, the house, the cars, the bank accounts. He saw what I put in versus what she put in, which he called almost nothing. But what about the life I gave her? What about making things feel normal? The house is worth $1.2 million now. I was the one there for every late night, arguing with contractors. She just wrote checks from a bank account that never seemed to run out. That was what she brought to the table, cold, easy cash. Her father bought her a painting back in 1987 for $40,000. She barely glances at it, and now it's worth a fortune. That's the world she is from, a place I can never really be a part of. She must wonder, what if I knew about the trust? She thinks I'm an idiot. She thinks I don't see anything, and she worked hard to keep it that way. She handed me a document right before our wedding. "Sign here," she said, like it was no big deal. Just a formality. I realize now I never had a claim. Not on her family name, her money, or anything she would inherit. My only claim was on her, the person, and I really thought that was enough. But everything was set up to keep me on the outside, like I was just a visitor in my own home. So now my lawyer is asking me what I want to do. I told him I need to have this party, just this one single night. He thinks this is all about the other woman, Cassandra. He doesn't get that this party is actually for me. This is me planting a flag on my own territory. I will not let her take this from me. He'd tell me to be careful, to think about what happens next, not what I'm feeling. He would ask if he should be worried. I would tell him, no. I'm not the kind of man who makes a scene. I just need this one night. I need her to see the life that I built, without a dime of her money. I need her to see what she's about to lose. I know she will have her guy or Frau Russell arrange everything for her countermove. She'll leak documents about her company press releases, old news articles, board announcements. She wants to remind me of who she really is. She thinks a fast Google search will scare me off, that I'll find out something I don't already know. But then my lawyer told me something, a tiny detail I had completely missed. The kind of detail that is never a coincidence with her family. The Rosewood rooftop, the exact place I chose for my party, is owned by a larger group, and her family's trust owns a 43% stake in it. I just sat there, completely still, when he told me. I was renting a room in her own castle to try and feel free. I could have just canceled. I could have found somewhere else. My lawyer was quiet on the phone, just waiting for my reaction. I told him I wasn't canceling, and he knew I wouldn't. "I'll be there," I said. I spent that afternoon thinking, not about being angry, but about the details. I was finally making my own play. I got my board ready and made my moves on Wednesday. Then, on Thursday and Friday, I played the part of a loving husband. A perfect performance. I got home Wednesday, and she had made pasta. The whole kitchen smelled like garlic. I ate 2 huge plates. I told her it was delicious. I asked how her day was. My body was there, but my mind was a million miles away. On Thursday, I asked her very specific questions about her work, the kind of questions that needed real answers. I watched her talk, and I just felt the bone-deep exhaustion of a man who's been pretending for way too long. Feeling at ease was a distant memory. On Friday morning, she had her 31-week checkup. Dr. Caroline Merritt was a very calm and direct woman. She made everything sound like a casual chat, not a serious medical exam. She pressed the cold device to Marga's skin, the wand sliding over her pregnant stomach. I glanced at the monitor. Everything looked perfect. The baby was developing right on time, strong heartbeat, and in the right position. Margot stared at the screen, and I saw something flash across her face. It wasn't happiness, it was something else entirely. I drove her home. She kept saying the doctor's words over and over. The baby was perfect, her heart was strong. "Great," I said. "That's just great." My phone vibrated in my hand. It was an urgent text, a real problem. My attention snapped right to it. She was watching me. I could feel it. She had to have noticed. I never once said the name Eleanor. We picked it out 2 months ago. I helped choose it, and then I just filed it away in my brain like a finished project. I had to stop my head from spinning. There were things I had to do on Thursday. On Thursday, I went out. "Drinks with people from work," I told her. I got home around 11. I smelled like expensive whiskey. I smelled like I was living a completely different life. She was in bed, with a book, but she pretended to be asleep. That little act was just normal for us now. I don't think she even realized she was doing it anymore. I waited until her breathing was deep and even. I just lay there in the dark. I thought about what she was carrying inside her, and I don't mean the baby. I mean the anger. I could feel it like a quiet storm brewing right behind her calm expression. But tonight was about me. It was for my own sadness. I was grieving the man I was when I first met her, The man who actually thought he could be enough for her. For all the years I spent trying to make myself smaller, quieter, easier to accept. I thought I was doing it for love, but it was really just about surviving. On Thursday night, long after I was asleep, she got up and went downstairs. I didn't hear a thing. The house was dead silent, but she couldn't sit still. She cleaned. She cleaned the entire first floor like she was furious. When you can't control the big things in your life, you start controlling the small things. She wiped down every single counter. She reorganized the whole pantry. She was on her hands and knees, pregnant, scrubbing the grout between the tiles with a toothbrush at 11 o'clock at night. It was completely crazy, and she must have known it, but she couldn't make herself stop. When there was nothing left to clean, she ran a hot bath. She just had to be doing something, anything at all. She wouldn't even take off her clothes. She'd just sit on the edge of the tub in her old jeans and sweatshirt, soaking her feet in hot water. The bathroom tiles are green. She picked them out herself, drove an hour to a special shop, and spent 2 hours finding that exact shade. She really loved those tiles. She told me once, "I'm going to miss these tiles." That's what she'd be thinking about. That's the thing that would finally break her. Not my party, not the texts, not some playlist I made for another woman. Not the thought of my hand on someone else's back. That was all just noise. But the tiles, they were real. The pale green tiles she chose for the home she built with the man she thought she knew. She'd cry for the tiles, for what they represented. And she'd do it quietly. She learned how to do that a long time ago. Then she'd dry her eyes, drain the tub, and climb back into bed. And then there was Cassandra Whitmore. I know Margot went looking for her, using ways that don't leave a digital trace, a skill her father taught her for situations exactly like this. Cassandra was 29, from Ohio, a marketing director, but not at my company. It all began with a simple idea, a better life. Cassandra was the blueprint for that life. Her Instagram was like a window into a world with actual sun, travel, and a family she adored. She had a master's degree. She made things. She was a whole person, not just a list of things to do. Margot was a life I had agreed to. Cassandra was a life I desperately wanted to choose. It was a fine line, but one I had to draw for my own sanity. I told myself that Margot must have known something was missing. That deep down she was unhappy too. The only other option was too much to think about, that she was perfectly happy in a life I found so empty. It was kinder to believe we were both just lost, and I was just the one who found a map out. None of this happened by accident. I built this new reality with my own 2 hands. I bought the tickets. I made the reservations. I sent those texts because she deserved to hear those things. I made this choice every single day for 14 months. This wasn't some mistake. It was a course correction. It was a different path that felt more real than the one I started on. On Thursday, I played my part. I came home. I was there, physically at least. Guilt is just a low hum you get used to. I poured the wine. I faked interest in a conversation we already had 3 days ago. I put my phone on the table, face down. A small sacrifice for a bigger sense of calm. She asked how I was. Honestly, she said. She felt like everything was about to change. I agreed with her. The 3rd trimester. It was the perfect excuse. So much easier than the truth. Yes, I thought, something like that. I refilled her water glass, a simple, husbandly thing to do. It made the lie feel a little more real. I have a client thing on Saturday, a huge event. You'd be bored, it's all business. You should just rest, if maybe have Patrice over. I couldn't look at her. The script was so familiar by now, it felt more true than the truth itself. She just smiled and said, "Of course, have a great time." The relief I felt was like taking a sharp, clean breath of air. She had no idea what was actually waiting for me. On Friday, I confirmed the flower delivery, called the caterer, and made sure her favorite champagne was on ice. Every little detail was a tribute to what we were building. This wasn't just some party. This was a new beginning, a quiet declaration to the world I was choosing to live in. She deserved to be celebrated. That was my one clear thought. I wanted to give her a night that was all about her. I wanted her to be the center of something beautiful, with no secrets, no need to whisper. A place where we could finally just exist. The party wasn't for me, it was my gift to her. It was my way of saying I see you, I choose you. My mother would never understand this logic. She only sees duty and obligation. She would say what I'm doing is a betrayal. But how is it a betrayal to finally choose happiness, to finally walk toward the light? On Saturday morning, I woke up alone in a hotel room. My head was clear. I was ready. The rooftop was perfect. The city lights looked like a net of stars thrown across the sky, with that magic hour glow that makes everything feel new again. I had planned this space for months, the white tablecloths, the small dance floor, expensive champagne in silver buckets, and the smell of jasmine in the air. That wall of flowers was a work of art, a waterfall of white and cream. It cost me a fortune, but I knew she would love it. Guests started to arrive, and a low murmur of conversation began to fill the air. I felt a real sense of ownership, a deep kind of satisfaction. I made all this happen, this perfect moment. I told myself to just be patient. Don't scan the crowd for her. Just let the evening unfold. Let her find me here, in the world I built just for her. I stood near the bar, needing a drink. The bartender saw my wedding ring. He had no idea it felt like a costume tonight. I found a spot by the railing. The view of the skyline was the best from over there. I could see the entire city. I waited for 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and then I saw my business partner, Graham. We talked about work. He laughed at a joke I told. I was wearing a new suit, one Margot had never seen. It belonged to this life. I felt light. The weight I carried every day was just gone. I realized that weight was my other life. It wasn't my job or the baby on the way. The weight was the lie of my own happiness. And then, she was there. She walked up the stairs in a red dress, and my entire world just shifted on its axis. The whole party seemed to rearrange itself around her. Conversations paused. People turned to look. I turned my head, and I'm sure my face gave everything away. It wasn't just desire. It was recognition, like finding something you were certain you had lost forever. I could finally breathe again. I could breathe here, with her. She was the reason, the justification for every single hard choice I made. She was worth all of it. She was my reward. At home, I was a burden. Here I was just a man in love. I knew with a sudden painful clarity that she was a fact, like the sky, undeniable, beautiful. I walked across the room to her. I kissed her on the cheek, my hand finding the small of her back. It felt like I was finally home. Her hand rested on my arm, a simple, easy sign that she belonged. Then Graham saw something. I watched his expression change from confusion to slow realization to just pure, animal panic. He looked like a man who just saw a ghost, a man who knew a storm was about to break. He mumbled some excuse and practically ran from me, heading toward the edge of the rooftop. His face was a clear warning, a silent alarm that I didn't quite understand yet. He spoke to her first. I couldn't make out his words. I only saw the careful way he stood. Then I followed his gaze, and I saw her. Standing by the bar. The world just stopped. Two lives colliding in one impossible place. My mind was racing. This was no coincidence. This was a setup. How did she know? What was her plan? She was an intruder in my new world, a ghost from the life I was trying so hard to leave behind. I had to move. I had to get control of this. I walked toward her, forcing a look of surprise and delight onto my face. "Margot," I said, "what a surprise." "I was invited," she replied. Her voice was steady. "This is a hotel, Derek." Her eyes scanned my party. The lighting was perfect. The jasmine was perfect. $18,000 on flowers just for Cassandra. This was how she should be celebrated. Then I saw Margot. My jaw tightened. 3 years, and she could still read me like a book. "A work thing, a colleague," I stammered out. The lie sounded so weak. "It was for a client," she corrected me, her voice like a pleasant, sharp knife. "Yes, a client." "Name them," she said. Her silence was her weapon. It always has been. The way she said my name didn't have a single bit of a tremor. No fear, just complete certainty. "What is their name?" The silence stretched on. The party noise faded into a dull hum. The whole world shrank to the tiny space between us. A strange sort of calm washed over her face. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness. It was clarity, a terrible kind of finality. I grabbed her arm. We had to get out of here, away from all these watching eyes. The show was over. My face felt numb. I was scared, and I was already planning my next move. Deep down, a part of me was strangely relieved. The waiting was finally over. I can explain this, I started. The words I know. Huh, she said. You do not need to. I found your phone. Her words were simple and direct. Tuesday morning. I read everything. The elevator dinged nearby. The party was a distant dream, a world I could no longer reach. I know about Cassandra. The name just hung in the air between us. 14 months. You told her she deserved the world. She paused, twisting the knife. Our daughter is due in 2 months, Derek. You promised someone else the world while I was carrying your child. Her words landed like a physical punch. All the blood drained from my face. Margot, I'm so sorry. It's never that easy, is it? I know, she said. Things always get complicated. That's not an excuse, it's just life. I told her I loved her, but the words felt hollow, hanging there in the air. This party, this room, this isn't Dawn, she said, her voice soft but absolute. Please, just don't. And I stopped. We will talk, she promised. My lawyer will be calling your lawyer on Monday. Until then, don't even think about coming home. It felt like a verdict. I could only stand there and stare. I'm going back to the party, she told me. Why? She looked right through me at a man she no longer recognized. This tie that Cassandra had picked out, my new suit, the expression on my face. The look of a man who just lost a game he didn't realize he was even playing. Because I am not the one who has to leave, she said. Then she turned around and walked back to the lights and music, grabbing a glass of water from the bartender. She found a small table at the edge of the rooftop and just sat down, completely alone, pregnant, and at my mistress's 30th birthday party. And somehow she looked calm, the kind of calm that comes right before everything explodes. But here's the one part I didn't know for a very long time. She had cried on her way up in the elevator, but never where I could see her. She would never let me see. She wasn't crying for the guests, and she wasn't crying for Graham. She was crying only for herself. For exactly 43 seconds between the lobby and the roof, she leaned on the glass and silently broke down. It was a skill she had learned years ago. The doors opened and she just stopped. She was always so good at stopping, that was the problem. I didn't go back. I just couldn't. Graham told me what happened next. He found her about 20 minutes after I had fled. He approached her carefully, like he was trying to disarm a bomb, and sat down with a whiskey he clearly needed. Margot, he began, looking like an actor who'd forgotten his lines. I need you to know I didn't know for a while, but then you did know, she said, simply stating the fact. He had to be truthful. Yes, he admitted. And you didn't say anything. She just looked at him. Graham, I'm not angry with you. I understand. I just needed to know that you know. He nodded, looking almost relieved that she was taking control, telling him how to feel. Is there anything he started to ask? No, she said. Just go enjoy the party. And he left her there. She sat by herself for another 35 minutes. Her friend was coming. She just waited, surrounded by all of my horrible decisions. Surrounded by jasmine flowers and the glow of the city lights. And that S when Cassandra saw her. I didn't know it then, but she was watching. Cassandra on the coup of our 30th birthday, and questions were starting to form. She saw me run away. She saw the pregnant woman sitting all alone, the same one my business partner was now confessing to. So she went and asked Graham. And Graham, who was already having the worst night of his life, told her. He told her just enough to change everything. And Cassandra spent the rest of her perfect birthday party holding a terrible new truth. The story she was living was a total lie. Its ending was rewritten without her permission. I know I should feel bad about it. A small selfish part of me does. The part that needed her to be easy, to be my escape. That part is almost sorry for what I did to her. Then Vivian arrived, Margot's mother. At 9:15, 40 minutes late, which meant she had probably stopped for a drink or new shoes or both. Vivian Ellison didn't just walk into a room. She commanded it without a word, becoming its center of gravity. She walked straight to Margot's table. and she sat down. She looked at her only daughter and asked, "Are you okay?" "No," Margot said. It was the first honest thing she'd said all night. Vivian just took her hand. She didn't say anything else. No advice, no judgment, no opinion on what a terrible person I was. She just sat with her. She held her hand and let the silence do its work. Sometimes that is the only thing you can do for someone. They stayed like that for a long, long time as the party swirled around them. People gave toasts, dinner was served, the music was entirely too loud. The city lights burned brightly below. At 10:30, Margot finally spoke. "I want to go home." "Yes," Vivian said. "I want to go home and get some sleep. And I want to take this all one day at a time." "Yes," Vivian said again. "That is exactly right." Margot drove herself home. She refused the car that I paid for, needing those 22 minutes by herself. The quiet of the highway at night, with some forgotten radio station playing softly. She got home at 11 but couldn't go into our bedroom. She stood in the doorway, looked at my side of the bed, and just turned away. She went to the nursery, the one room she had made so perfect, the soft white walls, the crib she'd assembled herself, rocking chair position perfectly to catch the morning light. She sat down in that chair, holding her stomach. It was 3 in the morning. This was never how it was supposed to go. She had a picture in her mind of what our life would be. It was never a perfect picture. She wasn't that naive, but she thought it was a real one. The 3 of us, building a family. And now that picture was just gone, turned to ash. She was alone in the dark, trying to imagine a new one. I made her feel small, not because she was, but because she just wanted me to choose her, the real her. So she hid parts of herself, hoping I would love who she truly was. What a cruel joke. I chose a version of her that wasn't even real. I chose a woman who needed me. But she never needed me, she only wanted me. And I could never have loved the real her if I had actually known her. She did not regret the baby. She never regretted the baby, only her own choices. Then the baby moved a slow, gentle turn, not a kick. In the quiet darkness of the nursery, it felt like an answer, like someone was there with her. "I am here. We are together." She stayed in that chair until the sun came up, and then she made coffee. On Sunday, I texted her from my hotel room, "I need to talk to you, please." She read the message, put her phone down, then picked it up again. She typed only 4 words, "Monday through our attorneys." Then she put her phone away and began watering her 17 plants. She watered every single plant in our apartment. She told me about this later. She counted every one of them. It took her 40 minutes, a quiet little ritual to keep herself from completely breaking down. Something simple, done with care. On Monday morning at 10 o'clock, Russell Hart called my lawyer, Philip Crane. Philip is a nice guy, but he's no shark. Russell's voice was calm, unhurried, the voice of a man who never loses a legal case. He told Philip that Margot Ellison was filing for divorce, that our prenuptial agreement was airtight, and that our shared assets were much smaller than I realized. Most of our wealth came from her private trust. He said if I tried to fight any of it, certain family business matters would become very public. Philip called me 45 minutes later. I had a million questions. He had no answers. Russell, her lawyer, mentioned Ellison Holdings. My lawyer asked what I knew about it. I said it was just some family trust. He told me I should have read the prenup. The truth was, I hadn't read it that carefully either. There was a long silence on the line. Then my lawyer told me his exact words were, "My client needs 24 hours. And yes, I absolutely needed those 24 hours. I hung up the phone. I just sat at my desk. The light outside felt dim. Summer was definitely over. Then at 2:15, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I have a strange fear of unknown numbers, a feeling that they only call with terrible news. It was a woman's voice, hesitant and tired. Cassandra Whitmore. She said she was sorry and that she could just hang up. I listened to her voice, a ghost from a life that was already gone. I told her not to hang up. I had to hear it. "I am sorry." That's all she wanted to say. She knew it wouldn't change anything, but she wanted me to hear it directly from her. "Okay," was all I managed to say. "He told me," she said, "that your marriage was over, that you were separating and just finalizing the details." That was the story he told me from the very beginning. That's what I believed. I didn't say a word. I know how this sounds, she continued, the classic excuse of the other woman. But I need you to know, I never would have done this if I knew you were pregnant. If I knew there was a baby. And then her voice just broke. I am so sorry, so sorry. And I believed her. I hated myself for believing her. It would have been so much easier if she were just some kind of monster. But this wasn't an act. This was the sound of a woman who was finally waking up to the truth. She was calling me because she finally understood. The man she loved was a liar, the same man who lied to me. We weren't friends, we weren't on the same side, but his lies connected us. I asked her, Cassandra, did he ever talk about money, anything he owned? There was a pause. He mentioned his real estate deals. He said once his wife's family had money and that it helped with the house. Did he ever give you a name? The family name? No, she said, he never told me. Tell you what, nothing, I said. It's not important. Thank you for calling, Cassandra. I really do mean that. Is there anything I can do? She asked. Actually, I said slowly, there might be. The moment we hung up, I called Patrice. I sat in my art room, looking at the painting my father had loved so much. The light was hitting it perfectly, making the colors feel alive. My father once stared at that painting for 20 minutes without a word. It was the calmest I ever saw him. I told Patrice everything about the call with Cassandra. She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked if I was just going to forgive everybody, if I was going to carry all the pain by myself. No, I said, I am done absorbing pain. Good, she answered. So what are you going to do? I'm going to let Derek see exactly what he had, I told her. I am going to let the whole world see it. I said it aloud to the empty room just to make it real. I had made myself smaller for him, so he could feel bigger. I am done being small. At 3 o'clock on Tuesday, Derek came over. He called first. He asked if we could talk, without lawyers, just the two of us. I said yes. He needed to see the complete picture. This was not about being cruel, and it was not about revenge. It was so he would finally understand the real value of what he threw away. He looked horrible. 2 nights in a hotel had completely drained him. The call from my lawyer had clearly broken him. He looked like a man who did the math over and over, hating the answer every single time. He sat down at my kitchen table. I sat right across from him. Tell me what you need, he said. I had never heard his voice sound like that before. It was the sound of complete and utter defeat. I need you to understand something first, I said, before we even begin talking about what I need. I took a deep breath. When we met, it was a test. I needed to know if you could love me for me, apart from my family. That has always meant everything to me. My father made sure money was never a problem for me. All I wanted was to be loved by someone who did not know that, to be wanted for who I am. Derek didn't move. You passed the test, I said softly for a while. I am not finished. He went quiet. You passed, and then you stopped seeing me. I was just part of the background. And while I was just a fixture, you found someone else. I understand that, I really do. But that party, while I was home, 7 months pregnant, that was not a mistake. That was a choice. A choice you made for 14 months. The man who always had an excuse was silent. I know, he whispered. Do you know who owns the building with that rooftop? I asked. The Rosewood? No. Then I told him. I watched the truth burn right through him. It was a necessary pain. I had to let her finish. This was the only way. She had to say it all to feel powerful. For a moment, I would let her. For the future I was trying to save. Then her words changed. She spoke of numbers, of foundations, of a world I never knew existed. My mind went blank. The woman I loved was a stranger, an elaborate lie. She had not built a life with me. She had just observed me in hers. How much? I asked. The question was a reflex, the only solid thing I could grab. The number doesn't matter, she said. But it did. It was the only thing that mattered. She was more than my wife. She was my keeper, my judge. And when I asked if we could fix this, if our life was real, she didn't even hesitate. The word was a lock turning, a door closing forever. This was her world, not ours. I saw that now. I thought we were negotiating a divorce. I was being managed. My attorney tried. He sent proposals. They were empty gestures. Her lawyer's politeness was insulting, just a reminder of how powerless I was. They called the settlement generous. It was charity, a tip for the guy who once shared her bed. I had nothing to fight with. After our talk, Cassandra searched the name Ellison, the name Margot had kept hidden. She showed me the articles, the photos, the entire empire. I saw the Forbes article, the impossible numbers, the buildings with her family name carved into them. I signed the papers. What else was I supposed to do? A man can't fight a god, he can only kneel. The full, brutal picture. I wondered if she felt triumphant. She must have. This was not a breakup, it was a victory. In her world, winning means you erase the parts that no longer serve you. She would tell herself she was landing on her feet and think of women less for a beautiful lie to make the execution feel like grace. She was not like them. She was separate. She had a cushion, an army. She had Russell Hart. That was not luck. That was power. And I was just the man who had to be erased. My things were moved out on a Wednesday. The process was neat, orderly, and final. I hired the movers myself. I would not let her see me broken. I walked through our rooms. Now they were just rooms in her house. I listened for any sound from her. Nothing. Just the hollow echo of boxes being filled. The front door opened and closed, erasing a piece of me each time. When the sound stopped, I was gone. Later, in the dark, she would claim my empty space. She would spread her life across the void I left and call it growth. I saw it as a conquest, erasing any proof that we were ever there. Then my mother called. My mother would understand. She had to. She had loved me for 30 years. I needed her to understand the woman her son had loved. Margot was admirable, but she was also a weapon. I waited for my mother to call me back, to say she had fought for me. But my mother's voice on the phone was different. She had not fought. She had completely surrendered. I know what he did. My mother's words cut right through me. She didn't defend me. She begged for access to her grandchild. She asked woman to woman, and Margot, in her power, granted the request. I was never going to keep her from you. The words were a masterpiece of cruelty, so calm. Margot was not just removing me. She was curating her child's life, deciding who was worthy. My father's voice was hollow and defeated when he called. He did not deserve you, he told her. I know, she replied. Then the final twist. Cassandra sent a legal statement. She put in writing that I had lied, that I said the marriage was over. She chose a side and it was not mine. She claimed she was no longer complicit, a noble word. I saw it differently. She needed to absolve herself, so she sacrificed me. Margot said they were in the same story, one neither of them wrote. She was wrong. They wrote the story together. I was just the villain they created. The idea I deserved better was a joke. She spoke of who she was, not what she had, as if they were two separate things. She wanted someone to see the big picture. But she hid that picture from me. It was a test I could never have passed. She would raise our daughter to know her own worth, to avoid my mistakes. She would teach our child to fear men like me, her father. I drove through the city that had her family's name on its buildings. I tried to name the feeling inside me. It was not grief or anger. It was the feeling of being erased. It was realizing the ground I stood on was never real. It was always hers. The ground was still there, and she stood on it. The light turned green. She went home. The name arrived in a text. A name chosen without me, for a child born in a room I was not allowed to enter. Her friends were there, her protectors. Flowers arrived from men who knew her preferences. The card welcomed Miss Eleanor and said the board will love you. A queen had given birth to a princess. And I, the father, was not there. It was her choice, clear and not cruel, she would tell herself. She texted, "The baby is coming. Hope is a foolish thing. Please let me come," he typed. The answer was silence. Then pictures. And in his daughter's face, he saw the final consequence. He had been cast off. This is the only way she will have a life, but not with me. Today belongs to her. I granted her that. At 4:58, a doctor placed the child on her chest. 8 pounds, 1 ounce, dark hair, wide eyes. A world I had to save them from. I saw her say hello, the baby just stared. I knew what she felt. The love, the fear, The grief for the life we were supposed to have. The perfect image I held. She could not see the truth. I had to be complete for both of us. My entire life was a path leading to this single choice. Not the wedding, not the wealth, not the job or the house. Protecting her now. This was the burden I was meant to carry. She held the child, unaware. The world moved on around her. People came and went. The doctor checked her vitals, writing things down, then gave Margot a small, perfect smile, a moment I had perfected for her. Then her mother arrived. Vivian Ellison, the woman who never showed emotion. She stood in the doorway, saw her daughter holding my child, and she just broke. Not a quiet break, but a real one, a dam of feeling bursting open. "The child looks like your father," she said. "I know," Margot answered. "He would have been." They sat in the silence I created. They called it beauty, or wait. I called it necessary. 6 days later, Margot was home. In her kitchen, morning light hit the window, the same light I last saw her in 7 weeks ago. This was peace. A quiet apartment, a future I earned. I was making coffee. Cassandra was asleep. It felt right. A completely clean break. I had finally chosen honesty. I thought of Eleanor, a brief pang for a name on a screen. But Margot would handle it. She was an Ellison. They handle things. I remembered my last words to Cassandra, whispered in the dark, "You deserve the world." And so did I, a world far away from all that weight. They were going to be okay. They had a system for everything, like a manual. I was not in the manual. The coffee was ready. Light filled the kitchen, and I did not check my phone. There was nothing I needed to see. This was my new life. I poured the coffee and drank it hot. For the first time in years, I felt that simple warmth. It was small, but it was everything. A month later, Cassandra showed me the Forbes article. It was not about me. It was a profile of Ellison Holdings announcing her foundation. And there was a photo, Vivian, Margot, and the baby Eleanor, just 3 weeks old, a prop in their perfect picture. It named Margot as the controlling trustee, the daughter of the late Theodore Ellison. 6 whole pages about her legacy. I read the article at our small table. Eleanor was just a name, a concept. The morning sun felt harsh. But I did not feel erased. I felt free, justified. This was what I had escaped from, living in someone else's story. That world was hers, never mine. For 3 years, I was Margot's husband. It was just a role I played. I tried to believe it, and I almost did. But she was always Theo's daughter, and Ellison, and I was just there. She knew who she was. The problem was, I knew it too. I was a footnote in her life story. I had to write my own. The act was over. When the piece came out, I texted her. My name on her phone, a ghost. I saw the article, I had no idea. I knew, I just did not want to see how big it was. "Margot, I am sorry." Useless words. I know it does not fix anything, but I am sorry. Her one reply, "Take care of yourself, Derek. Be good to her." It was a dismissal. Yes, an erasure. The end of my chapter in her book. The baby had opinions. That is what Cassandra told me people say about babies. I imagined a tiny Margot, like a miniature chief executive officer. She'd have thoughts on the milk's temperature and opinions on the sun's angle. It felt so distant, so unreal, like a life on another planet. A 6-week-old person I helped make, a person I would never really know. It was the most incredible, terrifying thing. I had seen her art, those cold, expensive objects people stared at. I had seen auction numbers, so huge they lost all meaning. None of it felt real. But a daughter with opinions, that was real. And I was not there to hear them. It was for the best, I told myself over and over. They were in Connecticut for Thanksgiving, at the main house, not our small one. Where I always felt like an intruder, filled with his ghost, his money, his legacy. She was reclaiming it. That is the word she would use. Reclaiming it by filling it with new life. Vivian would be there, running the kitchen. Patrice and her perfect little family would be there. Russell, talking business to a baby. I was sure all the main players were in their places. But my mother was there too. Margot invited her, a deliberate move, a calculated kindness I just could not understand. I pictured my mother holding a child that was half of me, singing a song from my own childhood, a past that felt a million miles away. My mother, Eleanor's grandmother. Margot let her have that. My filters were my own. My mother's love for that child was separate, a pure thing. Margot knew the difference. I hated that she knew. I hated her for that clarity. It made my choices feel so muddy and selfish. Patrice last probably next to her asking if she was happy, the question hanging in the wine-filled air. I wonder what she answered. Did she ugly cry? Margot did not do ugly things. She did efficient things. She processed grief like a balance sheet. That was the Ellison method. I imagined her looking at my mother and my child, finding some way to be happy, or at least look happy. It was something I had run away from. Then she would go into his study, the one room in that house I truly hated. It still smelled of him, cigars, old paper, and power. The furniture polish was the kind he always bought, an altar for a dead man. She would sit in his chair, hold my daughter, and talk to him. Not me, never again to me, but to him. A silent conversation I could almost hear, like a report to the chairman of the board. I found the wall, Dad. The choice between what is comfortable and what is true. I chose truth. She would see it that way. I was the comfortable choice, the easy lie she had to get rid of to become herself. I was a chapter she had to get through. She would believe she came out of it stronger, better. She would see her bruises as proof of her victory. She would hold that child and think about what she kept. Not the anger, not me, just the lesson. She would never make herself small again. The person who was supposed to see her chose not to. That was me. That is the story she will tell herself and our daughter. It was terrible. It was done. And she landed on her feet. Of course she did. She was an Ellison. She always landed on her feet. For her, the prison door was already unlocked. She just had to walk out. She never considered that I was the one who was trapped, the one who had to break the lock. She wrote Cassandra a letter. I never saw it, and Cassandra's never mentioned it. It was not about forgiveness. It was a closing of the account. She left us both in the dark. A neat, tidy ending. I hope you find someone who tells you the truth. A final, perfect cut. You deserve that. And so did I. She put us on the same side, two women betrayed by the same man. She mailed it, then moved on. By January, Eleanor was 3 months old. A real person with my father-in-law's judgmental look. Vivian cried when she first saw it. Margot went back to work part-time, choosing her jobs. The great machine of her life roared back, and my absence was not even a whisper. She had a freedom that I gave her, the freedom to work for fun, not because she had to. She took on a small project, a private collection of important art. She was good at that work. I made sure of it. She met a man in a plain office on a Tuesday. The room smelled of old paper and serious money. I know because I was there. I watched her explain her process, her past successes, her talent. She spoke with a confidence I had helped build for 15 years. She knew exactly how good she was. When they finished, the man stood up and took her hand. "You are very impressive," he told her. "Thank you," she said. She actually meant it. It was not a performance, no fake modesty like she used to do. She meant it with a cold certainty, a directness she never had before. "Yes, I know." She got in her car and called a friend. "I am shocked," the friend said. "I'm completely stunned. Do not be obnoxious." "I am going to be obnoxious forever," she laughed. It was a real laugh, not the kind she faked for a room, or the one she used with me. It came from somewhere new, a place I did not recognize. It did not ask for my permission. She drove home. The child was with Vivian. Her mother was in the nursery inspecting the books, sorting them, replacing some, buying new ones from a special store. The woman had her principles. They were building a fortress of their own design. The January sun cut through the windshield. It was different from the August light, different from that morning months ago when she stood there holding a glass of water. Her life was changing then because I was changing it for her. In just 11 minutes of reading, her entire world had split open. This new light was cold and hard, the light of a season that was sure of itself. It did not seem broken. It seemed whole. Just light, she probably thought. Enough light to see by, enough to move on. She parked the car. She sat for a moment, not frozenly in August, not with the panic of a woman trapped in her own home. It was just a pause, a breath between the old life and the new one she was building on the foundation of my sacrifice. She was thinking about the woman she was 7 months ago. The woman with bare feet and a secret I had to keep, a secret I had to bury. She thought about what that woman did not know and what she knew now. I land on my feet. I always have. I just forgot. I let other people's small ideas trap me. But I am done with that prison. Now, I am everything. The money, the art, the trust, the loss, the grief, and the child. I am the mother. The woman who drove 40 minutes for pale green tile just because she knew exactly what she wanted. I am all of it, and I'm going inside. The door shut behind her. Inside, I could imagine Vivian's voice reading a story, using that serious tone she saved for things she liked. The child was humming along, listening. Margot put her keys on the table. She walked toward those voices. She walked right into her life. My Eleanor grew up knowing she was loved and knowing her name and its story. A story I wrote myself. A house with pale green tiles, a small painting on the wall, a grandmother who read to her with a serious voice. She grew up knowing her mother made a powerful choice, that she once stood very still in it and made a decision. She chose the child. That is the story she will be told. It's a simple story, carefully put together by those of us who are left. It's Taste's story to purpose, made with love, to give her a truth she can hold on to, a lesson we want her to learn. But I am still here, and someday that story will need a new ending. Our team works hard to research and create these stories, sharing meaningful narratives with valuable life lessons. Each one is designed to entertain, inspire, and empower you. We truly believe great stories can change lives, and we promise to keep bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being a part of our community.